way, shape, or form earns the 3 in its title. And there are quite a few reviews that go this much in depth. Here's a pass advertised as something Brutal Edition buyers could purchase with the included 1,000 warp stones. It's not available at launch. We still have to wait 3 more months for the Blood Pass to come into effect. The glitches, the bugs, the appalling main menu and UI, microtransactions, the whole 9 yards. Everyone who's tried this game out are all saying the same thing. This really freaking sucks and gives EA Sports a run for its money. So yeah, let this be Exhibit A for how not to do a sequel and how not to release a video game, period. This is literally all of the worst practices we have seen from some of the greediest game publishers, just kind of rolled into one ugly package. And yeah, you're just better off with Blood Bowl 2. This seems like not only one of the worst sequel launches of all time, but just one of the worst game launches of all time, period, from a prominent enough developer that should know better than to release games like this. So that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Blood Bowl 3, if this was a game that you were interested in. If you are only finding out about it now, just steer clear from it. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.
Hollywood and anime. Two great tastes. One great taste and one okay one that taste awful together. Western adaptations have a terrible reputation within the anime community, and it's hard to blame us given how badly we've been burned before. But how bad are those burns, really? Which ones are the worst, and are any of these movies actually worthwhile? That's what I set out to find out by watching and ranking every Hollywood thing based on an anime or manga with an anime adaptation. Which does mean I won't be ranking Edge of Tomorrow or Old Boy, as neither of those manga has ever been animated, but if I did include them, Edge of Tomorrow would definitely be in the top 3, and Old Brolin would almost certainly be bottom 5. On the other hand, I will be ranking 2 anime movies filmed in Vancouver, British Columbia, on the technicality that it's also called Hollywood North. Because I'll take any excuse to talk up my hometown. They're both pretty darn interesting, and one is even kinda sorta official anime canon. I'll be ranking these movies and show from best to worst, because while it's generally better to save the best for last, let's be real, you're not here for positivity. You want to see the things that burned you get roasted back, and don't you worry, that is coming. But first, we've got to get through the actually good ones. Starting with one of the absolute best movies of any kind I've ever seen in my entire life, Speed Racer. It should be no surprise that the Wachowski sisters would be good at adapting anime, considering the movie that made them a household name was pitched by showing a bunch of film execs at Ghost in the Shell DVD and saying, "We want to do that for real." They reinvented action filmmaking as we know it to deliver on that vision. And then, with Speed Racer, they did it again, only even harder. So hard, in fact, that most anime-illiterate film critics of the era didn't know what to make of it, mistook their visionary, surrealist filmmaking and intentionally cartoony shot compositions and effects for low-grade Shark Boy and Lava Girl shit, and dismissed the whole thing out of hand accordingly, which led audiences of the time to do the same, turn the film into a box office bomb, and ultimately helped to cement the all-anime movies bad meme in popular consciousness. A misconception I myself suffered under for many years, until an also thoroughly underwatched Patrick Willems video convinced me to give Speed Racer a second shot, and I realized it's almost perfect on every level, including ones that aren't even theoretically possible. The main comic relief duo is a kid and a monkey in 2008, and they're actually super funny. In fact, they're one of the best parts of the whole thing. Well, I should say part of the best part of the whole thing. That is to say, the entire Racer family, who have one of the most wholesome, heartwarming relationship dynamics I've ever seen on screen. I mean, Any movie family with John Goodman in it is guaranteed to be adorable, unless he's evil John Goodman. We don't pigeonhole acting legends in this basement. And indeed, his performance as Pops is the beating heart of the film, but Susan Sarandon is just as great as Mom. Emile Hirsch's Speed radiates shonen protag energy like nobody else in Hollywood, and Christina Ricci's Trixie is a perfect partner for him while really holding her own as an action badass. And the action in this movie is nothing short of badass. Every race is more intense than the last. Every single scene, practically every shot, will show you a spectacle the likes of which you've never witnessed in live action. There's so much variety, too. Car chases, breakneck races through life-size loop-de-loopin' Hot Wheels circuits, cross-country death rallies, all with enough gadgets to make Bond blush. There's even a kung fu fight against some ninja assassins. This movie just doesn't let up on the gas, and when you start digging into the groundbreaking techniques it took to film it all, it only gets more impressive. But that's a topic for its own video essay. If you only take one thing away from this video, though, please let it be that you need to watch Speed Racer. Especially if you love stuff like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, because this movie is like that turned up to 11. That said, if you prefer something with a more concrete sense of realism, the second best Hollywood anime thing of all time, Battle Angel Alita, has you covered. And I've already covered it in depth, so I won't take up too much of your time rehashing that review. But if you haven't seen it yet, this film is widely seen as the one that finally delivered on what every high-profile anime movie to that point had promised and quelched on. Combining effects technology pioneered for Avatar, the James Cameron one, we'll get to it, with Robert Rodriguez's prodigious mind for cinematic violence, Alita immerses you in a dystopian world straight out of the original manga, and delivers cyborg-on-cyborg action that feels comparably intense to, and aesthetically consistent with, the 90s straight-to-video anime, while still doing its own thing. I wouldn't quite call it peak fiction like Speed Racer. The film has a lot of strong character interactions, but basically none of them happen in its tortured romantic subplot, and the ending leaves a lot open, with half the setting, the floating city of Zalem that rules over the Iron City junkyard where we spend the movie, left almost entirely unexplored. But with Cameron and Rodriguez having made a quote-unquote blood oath to do a sequel, that last point can become a positive, since they've already established where that sequel can go. Personally, I'm a hell of a lot more invested in seeing more of this world than, say, Pandora, and I don't think I'm alone in that. This is the movie that made a lot of anime fans believe anime movies could actually be good. Though, to be fair, that is due in large part to a lot of us having missed Speed Racer, not to mention third place, Crying Freeman, a 1995 three-way co-production between Canada, Japan, and France that adapts the classic Kazuo Koike manga of the same name in impressively faithful fashion, with one key exception. The original manga/OVA story of a brainwashed Chinese triad assassin fighting the Yakuza while falling in love with a hot witness he's supposed to kill was set mostly, naturally, in Japan. The film, however, turns it into a globe-trotting affair that still ends in Tokyo and Hokkaido, but starts in Vancouver, where the whole thing was shot. So instead of being constricted to the nondescript rainforests and could-be-anywhere city streets seen in every other movie made there, Crying Freeman can actually play around with iconic Vancouver landmarks like YVR, our beautiful modern courthouse, and the old courthouse turned art gallery, which here plays City Hall. That makes this film a rare treat for me personally, as a son of the city that never plays itself. Someone ought to tell Tony from Every Frame a Painting. And it becomes a completely different kind of treat when the film does move to a Tokyo Yakuza mansion with very obviously Haida Gwaii-style etched glass walls. But don't think that hometown bias is what made me rank this movie so high. It's just the cherry on top of a beautifully shot by award-winning cinematographer Tom Burton and edited by Hard-Boiled's David Wu thriller Cake, where a lot of the frames, particularly in the action scenes, are undeniably painterly. with clever, distinctly anime-feeling martial arts choreography shot slow and steady from angles that actually let you see every movement, it stands in stark contrast to the shaky, up-close, every punch-a-cut action seen in pretty much every live-action anime thing from here on down the list. Especially impressive considering Crime Freeman's budget was just $12 million adjusted for inflation, less than a third of what Dragon Ball Evolution cost to film. It's not without its flaws. The story, like that of the original manga, is built on some pretty darn shaky logic, and aside from Mark Dacascos, whose powerful presence as the titular assassin is felt in every scene, the principal actors can't quite carry the emotional side of it. But in conjunction with the cheaper, grainy film stock, copious use of slow-mo, and a somber score by Frank Zappa collaborator Patrick O'Hearn, the languid performances create a dreamlike mid-90s vibe that's aged shockingly well, like a Hong Kong action flick filmed in Twin Peaks. It's definitely more than the sum of its parts, and the last thing on here that I can wholeheartedly, given a taste of power and egged on by his sexy sociopath classmate, appoints himself judge, jury, and executioner over the people ruining society, petty criminals, and guys who bully him personally. In other words, he's your typical domestic terrorist, just with a death note. And the relatively lax response the U.S. authorities have to his actions as Kira, with his cop dad poised to accept what he did by the end, makes for some pointed commentary on that subject that's only gotten more relevant with time. Again, it's clearly not a movie for everyone, and as I said in my ancient review, it has some serious pacing issues that I think really hold it back from being as great as it could be. But it is very much a love it or hate it sort of movie that I think a lot more people, even Death Note fans, might come to love if they can put their preconceptions aside and watch it on its own terms. If nothing else, it's clearly the work of a passionate artist with something to say, and I'm always going to prefer that to cookie-cutter corporate Hollywood slop. On that note, Astro Boy, the lone animated film on this list, is a typical cookie-cutter cartoon adventure film from the late 2000s, blandly performed by a highly marketable list of big-name Hollywood not voice actors, which is especially disappointing when it comes to Dr. Tenma, a genius roboticist driven mad by the death of his son, and then even madder by his inability to perfectly recreate that son in super fighting robot form, played by Nicolas motherfucking Cage, should not be anywhere near this boring.
Where I said I'd take you to that symposium on quantum mechanics, but I'm afraid I have to take a rain check again.
But Dad...
Do as you're told.
I don't want you anymore.
That said, Tetsuwan Atom was always a fairly straightforward story for kids, so making it into a formulaic cartoon adventure film isn't that far out of step with the source material. The action scenes are generally well executed, too, even if they can be a bit, OMG, I have machine guns in my butt? To be fair, most of the film's comedy is at least stronger than that, and I think its lightly Americanized 3D take on Osamu Tezuka's iconic style holds up better than pretty much any non-Pixar 3D animated film from 2009. Speaking of Pixar, Astro Boy drew quite a few comparisons to Wall-E back in the day for its overtly environmentalist messaging, but in retrospect, its setting of a floating city run on robot slave labor hanging over a poverty-stricken junkyard settlement was almost certainly borrowed from Battle Angel Alita, which is kind of a weird choice, but also kind of a fun one that reflects the fact that Alita, along with basically any manga with a robot protagonist, was directly inspired by Astro Boy. What I don't like so much, even if I generally agree with the underlying message, is the film's preachy approach to explicitly leftist politics. It's not all bad. The Robot Revolutionary Front, a group of inept anti-capitalist androids desperately searching for a comrade not beholden to the laws of robotics so they can do better praxis than tickling the oppressor, are the film's comedic highlight. And I think Osamu Tezuka, who was briefly a literally card-carrying commie himself, probably would have enjoyed that. But the political themes of his work were considerably more nuanced and subtle than what we see here, with the evil mayor of Metrocity literally saying out loud in front of everyone, "Oh no, my approval ratings are dropping. I hope starting a war will fix that." It's just way too on the nose. I mean, the central MacGuffins of the film are these two oppositely charged energy cores, a good, wholesome, sugar and rainbows blue one that powers Astro, and an evil, unstable, violent red one that fuels the film's big bad warmongering end boss. They absolutely beat you over the head with this shit, and considering the film arrived dozens of drone strikes into Obama's first term, that shit was woefully outdated even back then. Speaking of dated, explicitly political stuff, G-Savior is one of the oddest oddities in the Mobile Suit Gundam canon, and boy, that's saying a lot. This 1999 Japanese-Canadian co-production actually was Universal Century canon for a while, though it's long since been wiped from the official timeline, and in an odd choice, it doesn't actually use the word Gundam once. Still, the plot about a ragtag group of scientists trying to avert a system-wide famine in defiance of a reorganized yet still obscenely corrupt Earth government military that wants to use the threat of starvation to bring the colonies back under control feels, thematically at least, right at home in Gundam's world. Said evil government, ironically and contrivedly acronymed Consent, is opposed by a secret society calling itself the Illuminati, which has secretly been developing its own super robots under the G-Savior program. Very Gundam stuff. The MacGuffin at the core of the story is a genetically engineered bioluminescent enzyme that produces UV light, allowing for underwater farming, which is exactly the kind of fiddly sci-fi lore I come to Gundam for. There's even a bit where a dude inadvertently makes a war way worse by failing to keep it in his pants in front of his girlfriend. That's as Gundam as plot points get. Tonally, though, the writing could use quite a lot of work. The script is peppered with eye-rolling Hollywood one-liners and awkward expository dialogue that detract from its overall efforts to create a concrete sense of time and place within the greater UC continuity, and that's not really helped by the TV to FMV tier delivery of its C to D list cast. Taken in conjunction with the Derry-esque manner in which the CGI has aged and all the generic industrial sets, that does lend the film a certain cheesy sci-fi original charm, but it's not hard to see why most franchise fans consider this a black sheep in spite of everything it gets right. Still, it has had a more enduring legacy than your average black sheep. The first PS2 Gundam game ever made was a direct sequel to G-Savior, also titled G-Savior, just to be confusing, that expands substantially on the conflict started here. And it has fully English voice acting, so if you do get invested in this story, there is quite a bit more of it out there for you to enjoy. The G-Savior Gundam itself also made a brief cameo appearance in Build Fighters, and its design, if nothing else, is generally held in quite high regard by Gunpla enthusiasts. At any rate, there have been far less faithful efforts to bring iconic Sunrise anime into the real world. Netflix's Cowboy Bebop has almost the opposite problem of G-Savior. Great acting and sets, if you can ignore everything else. As I said in my painfully honest review, John Cho, Daniela Pineda, and especially Mustafa Shakir absolutely embody Spike, Faye, and Jet respectively. And the only problem with Eden Perkins' performance as real-life Ed is that Ed in real life is just inherently way too much. With that cast and a brand new OST by Yoko Kanno in hand, not to mention some really solid costume and set design, all the show really needed to be a genuinely great Bebop adaptation was stronger direction, better action, and an almost entirely different script. I say almost because when it goes purely episodic and ignores the overarching plot, I mean, it's still not Bebop, but it kind of feels like it could be a sanitized, in-universe sitcom about the Bebop crew. A fair number of folks who've never seen the original anime ended up really enjoying the remake. Not enough to stop Netflix from Netflixing it, mind you, but enough that it actually has a positive audience score on Rotten Tomatoes now. And seriously, more power to the people who enjoy it. I hope you guys get to keep enjoying the Cowflix NetPop extended universe through comics and novels and whatnot. I just can't ever be one of you. Cowboy Bebop simply holds too special a place in my heart. And when I see what this version did to Spike by way of what it does to Vicious and Julia, or the way it pisses all over the original's coolest imagery and ideas, I can't help but feel a simmering, unquenchable resentment toward it. Still, enough of the series is enjoyable and clearly made with passion for the source material that I can't bring myself to fully hate it either. Though we are almost out of things I can say that about. Guyver Dark Hero is the 1994 sequel to the first anime movie ever made in America, The Guyver, which we'll get to once I'm out of positive things to say. Back then, Guyver wasn't even thought of as an anime movie, really. Just another entry in that brief pre-Burton Batman run of obscure low-budget comic book adaptations, which also included Crying Freeman. So the studio didn't think much of trading out the writer and lead actor to take a second, higher-quality chance at capitalizing on the brand name and the then-nascent English tokusatsu craze kick-started by Power Rangers the previous year. A good decision all around, I'd say, as a young David Hayter in his first major film role brings a lot of much-needed range and depth to the character of Sean Barker, an ordinary dude.
Showing to be playing in the same mode save. So for the game, you want to open up your options here. You want to, and then for in friends only that are useful, text chat I believe is only on PC. I can turn off PvP, so a number of other and that sort of thing. You need, and when you click show my No Man's Sky friend code, it's going to show a code. Now that code is what you need to give to your friend, and your friend needs to give you their code. So what you would do once you had their code is you click add No Man's Sky friend and you type that friend code in there, and then they will show up on your No Man's Sky friends list. But it's a little confusing. So like all these people are my No Man's Sky friends, but even if they're online, I can't join their game from here. So once you have your friends added, now what you need to do is quit out to mode select. Okay, so now from this screen, what you and your friend or friends would do is you would go to multiplayer when you start, and your friends that are on your friends list that are currently in game will show up here, and you can just go ahead and choose them, and you'll automatically be ported into the star system they're currently in. So if they're at their base, you'll be ported into that system and can fly down and meet them. So that's how you play together. So basically, I mean, you can get into groups with people in normal mode, like in the Space Anomaly and stuff, but so that's just going to be random people. It's likely not going to be your friends. It's not easy to just say, oh, let's meet in the Space Anomaly, because I don't think everybody, you know, is in the same Space Anomaly in their game. So that's how the multiplayer in this game works. So to recap, you need to share your friend codes and then add them, and then go to multiplayer, and then you just join your friend there. So as long as your friend is in game, you can join their game, and then you guys can go through the game together. The stuff you acquire, you will keep when you're not in multiplayer. You can build bases together. It's actually a lot of fun to play with friends. So I highly suggest it. I hope that helped you out. If it did, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. If there's anything I forgot, anything that helps people with multiplayer, please leave a comment below. I would appreciate it. And thank you guys so much. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Okay.
In the multiplayer
Ouais, je vois ça. Add No Man. Ouais.
I sent you my
C'est quoi ton code?
I sent it to you.
C'est-tu là? Ah, shit.
Oui, c'est long.
Comment tu l'as envoyé par...
Messenger.
Tu l'as envoyé par quoi?
Messenger.
Fuck!
I know.
Ok, Nat, tu peux-tu l'envoyer à Nat, puis Nat va me le dire.
Et sinon, je peux te le dire.
Oh, I can just read. Ok, ouais, dis-le moi. Ça commence.
AJP.
Wow.
JP.
Ah.
5. HP. 5.
Hey, mon petit Chris.